if you're here to watch an episode of Writer's Block, if you're subscribed to my channel for just that reason, prepare to be disappointed. No, I'm actually sorry that we haven't done an episode in a little bit. I will try to have one done soon. It's just like scheduling issues. I try to do one every 2 weeks. It's just not always capable of doing that with the scheduling issues and my own incompetence, frankly. But okay. I actually had a little bit of a rant on Twitter this morning. I thought I'd just go ahead and do a video about it. So I've noticed that a lot of people who do rankings, not just HLTV though, there are the obvious outlier, the big name to pick on, will concentrate the players of the winningest team in their player rankings. Like last year, for example, SK, three leading players, I guess if you could call them that, for Fallen and Cold Zero, all made the top 6, I believe, of HLTV's rankings. I think that's a little absurd. I don't disagree with it. I think Simple was only ranked 9th. I mean, I think that's obviously, maybe it's not obvious. Maybe I have to say it. I think that is ridiculous. I think that's silly. I didn't agree with that at the time. I think I talked about it in the very first episode of Writer's Block. I think it didn't make any sense to me. But I think the stupidest version of this, the stupidest, lowest resolution, idiots, troglodyte, tongue dragging, smooth brain version of this is like, okay, well, if they're the winningest team, they must have the best players, because if you're winning and you're beating all the teams with the other players, your players must be better, so therefore they're the best because you're the best. It's all this circular, shitty logic that doesn't really make any sense. I mean, we all know that Astralis is anyone with like two brain molecules in like snail mail levels of contact with each other can tell that Astralis's play style doesn't revolve around headshots and headshots alone. There are strategic, utility-based, rotation-based, mid-round, late-round. They play the game in a way that's intelligent. It's not based on pure skill, and they don't simply have the best players. There's a lot of teams with comparable players in skill-wise, and there's teams with better players, in my opinion, skill-wise. Look at Simple, look at Nico, even MIBR with Cold Zero and Stewie 2K and Tarek, and okay, Phelps and Fallen had off years. Not Phelps, for Fallen had off years, but that's a very skilled lineup altogether. They just didn't have a cohesive style, and it's like this. It seems like this fundamental misunderstanding that like best players equal wins, rather than players plus, like, there's your play style, your cohesiveness, your tactics, your players all sort of join together equal, like Counter-Strike, and how well you do Counter-Strike is how many games you win, right? How well you face up versus the opponent. So it just seems like ultimate dog shit levels of analysis, right? But actually, okay, here's the slightly improved version of that. I think it's like almost like a cynical, sort of like extreme postmodernist interpretation of the game, if you want to use those sort of eclectic philosophical terms that I don't really understand, no matter how many times I Google them. Where, okay, we can all accept the premise that there's not an objective best. This one player X is not objectively better than player Y, and in cases like very close, very similar levels of skill, very similar levels of outputs, very similar roles on teams, and it's hard to differentiate. There's all these other factors that play into it: communication, how they contribute to the team outside the game, what their role is. That's very hard, or in your own biases that you come into it with, whether you prefer the play style of X player over Y, or whether you happen to be a fanboy of X player over Y player, right? That it's very hard to differentiate because of the fallibility of your own brain and the mutability or the vagueness of the actual setup of the idea of ranking players, that there's going to be confusion or uncertainty in how these players would be stacked up. There's no objective, observable truth with a capital T, right? You have to filter it through your own understanding of the game and your own the amount of research you've done. You can't watch every single game 10 times to watch every single player. There's just not enough hours a day. You got to write other articles. You got to go your other job, right? There's just not. You just can't put in the subsequent or you can't. Not only can you not put in the amount of time necessary to come up with like a objective rating system that would be perfectly illustrate the relative skill or the skill of each players in relation to each other. You can't. There just is no best. I mean, your idea of how valuable is a star player versus a support player is incredibly subjective to your own experience. Do you, if a player is set up for success and succeeds, do you have to give him credit more than that exceeds or is equal to or is less than whether a support player is not set up to succeed but still puts up good but maybe not matching levels of output? It puts up. How do you relay those two outputs? Is a star player, should he get the same amount of credit as the output of a support player? Should he get more or less? It's all dependent on like what's the multiple, right? How much more credit should a support player get per each kill that he gets because he is not set up for kills? Like these things aren't. There's no golden pamphlets handed down from God. Golden, what is it? Leaflets, golden tablets, golden tablets handed down from God at Mount Sinai, right? There's no Rosetta Stone, to keep going with the stone metaphor, right? It's a subjective process, and I think the reason that some of these ratings do tend to overrate teams that have the winningest player, is the winningest team that overrates the players on the winningest team, is because people don't want to. They want to say, okay, there's too many factors in play. I can't do the amount of work necessary. I can't figure out, or I don't want to put myself out there, or I don't want to risk, or there's no point in risking, or I shouldn't risk, or it's wrong to risk or put out my subjective opinion. Let me step back from beyond the veil of trying to assess these things. They are unknowable. We can't understand these things. I will just relent the responsibility of ranking these players to a very simplistic system of evaluation, HLTV 2.0 ratings or something like this, or who has the most kills subtracted by deaths, who has the highest number, and then you can average them out, maybe on amount of land games played or amount of rounds played or something as silly as this, right? Just a very simplistic look at it, because they think that it's like a straw man version of postmodernism, or a sort of critical assessment of postmodernism, where if there's no capital T truth, that everything is subject to interpretation, then we might as well sink into nihilism. There's nothing, we know nothing, there's nothing worth doing, or that we don't know what to do, because it's all subjective. There's nothing to latch on to. There's no transcendental signifier. Okay, I'm almost certain I didn't use that last word correctly, but okay, let's put that aside for a second. Now, I'm not against the idea of using stats in an article. I think that this is probably because I've sort of disagreed with the idea of using stats before, maybe criticized HLTV 2.0 ratings before. I think maybe that's sort of maybe watching this video, that's sort of the tone I'm going to take, but it's not actually. I think the work that 16-0 does, Lorpus, Yog, and actually I don't know how active Lorpus is or isn't, because I know he does I don't want to speculate, but Yo, Glurpus, and RxCS. I always forget the last guy's name, but I am sure. I can't assess the objective reality, so I will subjectively assume that he is producing an equal amount of effort and doing equal amounts of good work because I have no evidence to the contrary. But no, I think they do interesting things. I think they are trying to, with their modeling, with the sort of stats they're looking at, trying to pin down stuff like aim using the deltas between where the crosshair is to where they move it. When they actually hit the first shot, the time, the measuring reaction time using time enemy appears to time actually tagged. Yeah, I think that they're doing really interesting stuff and trying to make objective all these other previously subjective opinions, and they're trying to find ways to evaluate players and evaluate teams that isn't so. I know, yeah, okay, I'm not. These terms aren't perfect, but like a nihilistic understanding, like, oh well, we can't know anything, so like let's just do a simple. Let's just look at KD because that's the simplest stuff. Let's just like throw our hands up, say fuck it, and just like use a simple numerical number to evaluate these players because there's no point in doing it ourselves, right? They're actually trying to eliminate all these subjective factors. They're trying to get a better understanding of the game, even though they know that that's going to be factored through their own fallible modeling, that they're not going to get it perfect and it's not going to reflect an objective reality because there is no objective best. I mean, there's no there's nothing that you can latch on to that says that simple is better than Nico, right? Because better is such a nebulous term. You'd have to define better, and then you'd have to then you're putting in your own subjective opinions into your own definition. You're selecting the definition, right? There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing solid there, but none of this means that you. What I disagree with so strongly is that it's just a silly premise. Like, okay, yeah, we know that there's no objective truth, so why should that bother anyone? Why should we abdicate trying to do something cool and specific and trying to grasp onto all these factors at once and trying to do our best ranking system, even though we know that we will never be correct because there is no correct, right? Insofar as we can ascertain. Maybe if you believe in that sort of thing, a capital T truth. Maybe if you're a cool philosophy student who wants to leave a long comment explaining why I'm wrong on all these points, go ahead. But yeah, it's just a frustrating point of view, and I don't know why we can't just have an interesting discussion about these players. Why do we have to relegate ourselves to sort of a nihilistic, simplistic, fuck it, I give up sort of mentality to these ratings? I think we can do really cool. And in the next episode of Writer's Block, we will be evaluating a top 10. I don't know if we're going to have time for a top 20, but we'll do a top 10, and hopefully it will be a good episode that will make up for the wait.